Good evening. Tonight, we drill down into three stories that have many layers. First, the taxi deal. Will the plan for hailing cabs of any color outside Midtown really work for livery drivers and passengers, especially the disabled? We'll examine the Food and Drug Administration's quiet reversal. It no longer pledges to reduce the use of antibiotics in farm animals. Does that policy shift make us humans more vulnerable to infection? And we'll do a bi-coastal evaluation of New York's high-tech economy, a silicon smackdown, their valley versus our alley. Where do entrepreneurs really want to be? First, that historic taxi deal. Remember this promise in Mayor Bloomberg's State of the City message last year?
Why shouldn't somebody in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, or Staten Island be able to hail a legal cab on the street? You know, 97% of our yellow cab pickups happen in Manhattan or at the airports. And even though 80% of New Yorkers live outside of Manhattan. This year, we'll establish a new category of livery cars that can make on-street pickups outside of Manhattan. It will give New Yorkers in all 5 boroughs another safe, reliable, and convenient option for getting around. Because whether you're standing on 42nd Street in Manhattan, or 42nd Street in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, or 42nd Street in Sunnyside, Queens, you ought to be able to hail a cab.
Hailing a livery cab in Queens will soon be legal. A complex last-minute compromise between Albany and City Hall at the end of the year creates a system of permits for livery drivers, 18,000 permits. It requires that the first 1,800 issued be for cabs that wheelchairs can fit into easily. The deal raises $1 billion for the city, not from the livery drivers, but by allowing the sale of 2,000 more yellow cab medallions. And every one of those has to be accessible, something Governor Cuomo insisted upon.
This is a more than a good bill. The initial hope when this venture first started was to accomplish several tasks simultaneously. Number one, the city needs revenue. Why? Because the city needs revenue. It's a function of the economic circumstances. The state is feeling it, the city is feeling it, and the sale of medallions generates revenue for the city. So the city was initially looking for 1,500 additional medallions for the revenue that it would generate. The second goal was livery service to the outer boroughs. I can tell you as a boy originally from Queens, the cab service to the outer boroughs is truly difficult, has been for years and years. Livery cabs, livery cars have been filling the void, albeit illegally, for a long period of time, and this was the situation that existed. How do you extend livery service to the outer boroughs, and how do you give livery drivers a great economic life, a great economic vehicle for growth, empowerment, et cetera? On the taxi side, the yellow side, the medallions brought a whole generation of immigrants into the middle class and beyond. The escalation in the value of the medallion really built businesses. Can we do that on the livery side also? And can we do that on the livery side in a way that is fair and protects the taxi industry and the yellow industry that bought a medallion with a certain franchise and representation? Can we balance that? And then third, how do we make the system accessible? Why? Well, first of all, the law says it must be accessible. Second, it's the right thing to do.
The taxi deal is being hailed as an example of government working up in Albany, but will the plan work down at street level? Does it help livery drivers and truly serve the disabled and other passengers? Joining us, former taxi driver and City College student, now City Council member representing Upper Manhattan's 10th District, Ydanis Rodriguez. By his side, a man close to these negotiations who's long been fighting for accessible transportation, James Weisman, General Counsel for the United Spinal Association. And via Skype, Matthew Daus, now a lecturer at the City University's Transportation Research Center, and for years, he was in the driver's seat as chair and commissioner of the TLC, the Taxi and Limousine Commission. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for doing this. Mr. Weisman, let me start with you because I think this is a huge victory for the cause that you've been fighting for all these years, correct?
Thank you. Yes, yes. We're happy about it. I believe that it's a win-win-win. I think the state wins because Medicaid transportation costs will go down, and Access-a-Ride, the state and the city pay for Access-a-Ride. Their costs will go down because of reduction in demand, and also being able to employ these vehicles as subcontractors, especially deliveries.
Matthew Daus, as former TLC commissioner, is this something you fought for? Is this something that you think will make a difference for New Yorkers in wheelchairs?
Well, I'll tell you, Brian, I think it leaves a lot of questions out there. I have a very different perspective now. As you mentioned, I'm teaching transportation policy and sustainability. I'm also a partner at a law firm, Windell's Marks, where we actually have a transportation practice. And I'm president of the Taxi Commissioners Association internationally. So couple that with my experience, I've been doing a lot of traveling and speaking around the world, and I believe the devil's in the details on this. I think unless there's real enforcement, serious enforcement, the law itself is not going to work. And number two, I think that there's a better way to provide accessible service. I think we need to get the right number of wheelchair accessible cabs, not just picking numbers out of a hat and justifying them with studies that came after the fact. Despite the best intentions of the mayor and the governor, as the political process took over and the negotiations took place, I think we really need to look carefully at how we implement this. But I applaud everyone, including the TLC and everyone who worked hard, including James and the council and the state, for trying to do something to fix this problem, which has really plagued the city for many years in many ways. As a Brooklyn resident,
so let me interrupt. What's the better way that you see? Is it just a matter of the numbers being too small? It should be every taxi and every livery car. Or what's the better way?
I mean, we basically just opened the door to put $54 million in retrofits into the bill, which could be used for enforcement. We don't need that many wheelchair accessible cabs if we use a dispatch system and a toll-free number, as Chicago does. Chicago has less cabs than we have now. If this bill's fully implemented, you'll have more wheelchair accessible cabs than there are users underneath the.
Let me take that point and go back to Mr. Weisman and ask you, more wheelchair accessible cabs than we have users. Are there really people in wheelchairs going onto street corners and trying to hail yellow cabs or livery cabs, or aren't they more likely to call for one?
Well, you'll be able to call for one in the boroughs and north of 96th Street,
which you
because
cannot do now?
No, because they don't exist. If you could fold up your chair, if you were in a manual wheelchair that you pushed yourself, and you could fold it up, and you could call for a livery cab now, and they would pick you up, put your chair in the trunk like luggage. If you are in a scooter, which more and more people are, the baby boomers are aging, or you're in a motorized chair, which more and more people are because you can travel great distances outdoors. People who go to work, for example, you can't do that because they don't fold. 100,000 trips a month on lift-equipped buses in New York City. 100,000. Most of them are peak hour riders. They're going to work, and these people have disposable income, and they're going to take taxis, and they're going to go to the theater, and they're going to go to restaurants.
So let's stay on this point, and Councilman, I appreciate your patience, and we'll get to you in a minute, but you seem to have a significant disagreement on this. Mr. Daus, is it not significant if people in the outer boroughs and above 96th Street can now call a car service and get a car that actually can take them in their wheelchair rather than just fold it up and treat it like luggage?
Well, first of all, that service did exist. We put it into place when I was there, and the main reason why I believe the lawsuit, which James has been involved in, has been successful is because there's basically just been a lapse in the end of the pilot program and the start of the new service. So I still believe that doing a dispatch system is the way to go. My interesting idea, which prompted my participation in your show, Brian, was an op-ed I wrote in the New York Times last week, which suggested that we stop wasting money on the Access-a-Ride service. Over hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent on inefficient vans with multiple passengers, where the average van, even though they have in excess of 6 to 8 seats, carries a little over 1.5 to 2 passengers, who are in wheelchairs.
And do
a
what
lot
with
of people who are in fixed incomes who are in wheelchairs can't afford to take yellow cabs. And I think that's something that was missing from the TLC's pilot. You know, fewer than 8 trips per day of all the 200 cabs that have been on the road for the last couple of years serving people with disabilities, that I'm very proud that we did. Only 2,000 people used it, 2,000 individuals out of 60,000 potential individuals. So I think what we need to do is redirect some of that money that's being wasted on accessoride van trips, which is on average $50 to $60.
And go to a dispatch system.
A dispatch system with a cab ride, which is more efficient. Right. It's about $12 to $15.
Councilman, I want to get into some other aspects of this, but do you have an opinion on this briefly?
Well, I think that the mayor, he been trying to recruit a lot of experts from London to come here and advise our city in educational policy. Why don't we look at London as a city where each car are accessible? And I think that when we have a city council where 38 council members has signed a bill introduced by my colleague Capel from Riverdale, who say we should each yellow taxi should be accessible, because at the end of the day, that population deserve the services, and we go in there. Mm-hmm. Say we don't think about people who are in disability. We think about, like New York, the population of disability is growing in the city.
Absolutely, but what about the accessoride question that he raises? Would you rather go to a dispatch system where some of these various cars could be part of that system and pick up people who had wheelchairs or scooters or whatever? Do you get complaints about accessoride from your constituents? Do you think your constituents use accessoride and the city's getting its money's worth from it?
Well, first of all, I believe that I just hope that at one point all yellow taxis should be accessible. That should be our dream, that should be our goal. I believe that the increase of accessible yellow taxi now, plus the 6,000 Libre that will also be accessible in this plan, is a good progress for the city. But it should not stop there. I believe it should be our generation goal to make each Libre and yellow taxis accessible in New York City.
And would that, if that comes about, make the accessoride vans obsolete or no?
Well, let's have that discussion when we
get there. Okay, let me ask you about non-disabled riders. In general, and you know, and I'll disclose, we live in the same neighborhood. You represent me in city council. So there are very, very few yellow cabs ever in uptown Manhattan where you and I live. So we use these livery cars. We call them and we hail them. And it's illegal, but they stop for us. So is the city solving a problem or solving a non-problem? Because anybody can go out onto the corner of, you know, Dyckman Street and Broadway or 181st Street, or pick your spot, and hail a livery cab today.
I think that this deal is an important program for the city, especially for the livery taxi industry. I drove a livery taxi in the 80s when I was at City College. And however, reality is that we have a working class, which is a group that we had driving livery taxis in the city, where they've been working for decades. And at the end of working 20 or 30 years, they don't have anything valuable in their hand.
In other words, they're not making as much money. Because I agree with you. I love taxi drivers, to tell you the truth. I talk to taxi drivers whenever I'm in a taxi. And I love talking to the Dominicans in our neighborhood who overwhelmingly drive for the car services up there, the Pakistanis and the Nigerians and the others who are driving in the yellow cabs. But do the Dominicans in our neighborhood who drive for Seaman and First Class and the other ones, they're not making the same living as the yellow cab drivers? Is that what you're saying?
Of course not. A livery taxi driver had to work 60 and 70 hours to make $700 a week. Plus, most of them, they have to be working during the weekend when the children are home. So it's a big sacrifice that they do in order to make a decent salary for the family.
Or is the bigger thing that when they get out of the business, that they could then sell the permit that they'll be able to get now, like the medallion?
That's the important piece. That's the
piece.
important piece that I see in this deal.
So they've got some equity in their taxis.
They will have it.
Not just fares.
Exactly. Plus, I think that also when I think that there's a lot of details on this deal. Like we're going to be creating 18,000 legal street hail taxis. There's more than 18,000. So the question is going to be, what's going to happen to the other 15,000? Will we go out like giving fine for those because they're doing a street hail?
Because there are about 33,000 livery
around
cars
35,000.
now. So 18,000 will be licensed with meters, and the others will not. You're an advocate for the disabled. Do you have an opinion about this in terms of the general population?
I do. I think that I disagree with Commissioner Daus a lot about what he said before, but the one thing he said that I agree with is that without enforcement, this will be meaningless. These 18,000 permits, to have a value, I mean, they are transferable, but they'll be valueless if you can do street hails without the permit. So the city will have to enforce them to create the value that they're telling the drivers that they're going to have. They'll have to enforce the law against those who can do dispatch only.
So, Mr. Daus, is that possible? Are we going to use our police force or whoever it is to go out there now and stop all these street hails that are taking place above 96th Street and the other 4 boroughs?
Well, something definitely needs to be done. I mean, I do agree with the council member that, you know, the ultimate goal always should be, like London, 100% accessibility, but these are tough fiscal times. And when we're strapped for money and using this as a mechanism to raise revenue, I do believe, number one, that we have to be very mindful of this $54 million just being thrown away, because this bill does not get us to 100% accessibility. It gets us to about 20% or so potentially. And unless you get to 100%, the hailing thing doesn't work for disabled New Yorkers. And I can tell you, I will never, as a lifelong Brooklyn resident, and I also teach at City College, so I'm very familiar with your neighborhood, where yellow cabs are scarce, I'm never going to hail a livery cab because I live on a side street in a borough, and it's a lot easier for me and for disabled New Yorkers, all New Yorkers, to basically call a car service and have a car delivered to your door. It's more convenient. I've never had a problem. I mean, I would not want to walk 3 to 4 blocks to go and hail one of these new livery permits. It doesn't work for me. The better solution was something that the mayor and many people in the industry were discussing early on, and that's livery stands. I've been a big proponent of this from day one. In fact, before I left the TLC, I instituted a pilot program on the Staten Island at the Staten Island Ferry on the Staten Island side, where one or more car services can get a franchise from the city to operate at curbside. Because most of the street hails that occur now, whether and Washington Heights may be a little different, and Inwood, there's a lot more activity there, but a lot of different areas of the city, the street hails take place at transportation hubs.
Right. People
get off the subway, they're looking in what used to be a 2-fare zone, looking to get back home in a suburban area, and that's where the street hails come in. If there is a dispatcher with the franchise with one or more car services that win the city contract, the city, in a very controlled way, can use less enforcement officers in that area and police the area. And it was something that the transportation commissioner rejected at the last second because she thought it would create a lot more congestion.
We're almost out of time. You know what I'm curious about? Why does the city get to regulate or determine the number of medallions in the first place?
You mean the state?
The city and the state had to agree on the number, right? But why does the government get to regulate the number of medallions? We don't tell the restaurant industry how many restaurants there can be in New York City. We establish health standards and laws to make sure that they, properly are serving the public.
Well,
why not just say anybody can set up a taxi company, but you have to adhere to the safety standards, accessibility standards, things like that, Mr. Weisman?
Well, the commissioner probably knows the historical reason why, but right now, if you bought a medallion at an auction for $1 million, that would be heresy to say anybody could set up a taxi business because they have an interest in control. The taxis themselves
a piece of gold,
have an interest in restricting the number. So I don't think it's going to change that quickly to a plan like you're talking about. Maybe the commissioner knows where it came from.
Very briefly on this.
It had to do with the Great Depression. People were basically giving their permits back when the economy tanked in the Depression era. And then at some point, Alderman Haas, when the city council was the Board of Aldermen in New York City, passed the laws capping the number so that people could have a reasonable number of cabs for not just environmental purposes, but to preserve the livelihoods of those who were looking to deal with reduced business. And this is a great debate among academics all around the world. There are different ways of doing it. Some systems are open, some are closed. So
it's to push up the value so that when they retire, they have some equity to retire
Which also should bring us to protect those 18,000 permits that are going to be selling. Because as the commissioner here said, not every borough has the same need.
Right.
Liberty taxi drivers in Staten Island, they don't have to deal with street hailing, let's say. Areas in Brooklyn and Queens, neither. So I think that what we have to protect is also that the 18,000 permit should be provided first to those drivers that they've been providing services to area where street hail has been on demand.
It will be a new era soon in taxi and livery hails in New York City. Thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Coming up, the FDA does an about-face on antibiotics in farm animals. How will this affect human health?
Today is Saturday. 60 minutes of physical activity a day and eating well can help get your child healthy. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov. That's letsmove.gov.
Did you know that getting up and getting active for just 60 minutes a day is all it takes to help you get stronger, look better, and feel great?
Or that fresh fruits and veggies aren't just healthier and crunchier, they can taste better too?
Eating better and getting more active is easier than you think.
Yeah! Keep watching for some fun and easy ways to discover the magic of healthy living in your life.
America.
Let's get healthy together!
Cook foods to the right temperature using a food thermometer. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
2 outs with a runner on first base. Now the big guy comes up to bat, hitting .342 with 92 RBIs and 36 homers.
Chill raw and prepared foods promptly. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Teaching a kid football is one thing. Keeping a kid in school, that's the name of my game. My name is LaDainian Thomason. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
I'm Brian Lehrer. It's time for Planet White House, where we tackle an environmental health issue that is part of the presidential debate, or ought to be. Today, the FDA and antibiotics. Now, just before the holidays, the Food and Drug Administration made a quiet announcement. Though it had promised for decades to restrict the use of antibiotics in agriculture, the agency now says it will not do so. We'll examine the politics shortly. First, the public health and the science. Many groups, including the World Health Organization and the American Medical Association, say antibiotic use in animals poses a serious threat to human health. So does Maryn McKenna, author of Superbug, The Fatal Menace of MRSA. She joins us via Skype from Atlanta. Also with us is Avinash Kar, a staff attorney for the environmental group, the Natural Resources Defense Council, which was trying to get the FDA to do more, not less, about this issue. He joined us on the phone from San Francisco. Welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for being with us. First question goes to Atlanta. Please tell us, Ms. McKenna, why you think that it matters to human health what antibiotics are taken by animals.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So it's really not very well known by people that the vast majority of antibiotics that are sold every year in the United States are actually used in farm animals, not in people. 80% by the last estimate of antibiotics go into farm animals. And they're almost all given to healthy farm animals. They're given either to make them put on weight faster so they can be sold faster, or they're given to actually protect them against the bad effects of the close confinement conditions that they're raised in. The problem with that is that within each of those animal systems, there's effectively a Darwinian battleground that allows drug-resistant strains to survive. They then pass out of the animals in manure, or they pass off the farm when the animals are slaughtered, and they cause drug-resistant illness in humans. The links are very clear.
So, Avinash Kar, what happened at the end of December, and how big an about-face was this for the Obama administration?
First of all, thank you for having me on. Yes, in December, the FDA essentially reneged on its 35-year-old promise to address the overuse and misuse of antibiotics in livestock. You know, back in '77, FDA acknowledged the mounting public health threat that's associated with feeding animals low doses of penicillin and tetracyclines, which can promote antibiotic-resistant bacteria that are capable of infecting people, and they promised to deal with it. Last May, we filed a suit to compel the agency to follow through on that promise, but this Christmas, they seem to have changed their mind. They attempted to sweep the issue under the rug by withdrawing the document in which they made these findings. But that only makes our resolve to move forward on this issue even stronger, and we're going to continue that legal fight.
Maryn McKenna, I know your specialty is the science, but do you have an opinion about what happened here? Was this just the Obama administration caving to political pressure from the agricultural lobby or from anybody else, or what do you think happened here?
Well, you know, this has been on the books for a really long time, and the FDA said in its posting in the Federal Register that what they wanted to do instead was pursue a path of voluntary reform. I can understand, I suppose, they're wanting to move something off that may not be suited anymore to what we know about antibiotics since new drugs have come out. Maybe some practices have changed, but the reality is voluntary in most cases doesn't get you very far. Now, that said, some people will say that a separate action that the FDA took the following week actually looks like they may actually have some teeth in what they're doing, because they did put controls on some drugs, although it was a much smaller class of drugs than the ones that they kind of threw up their hands about the week before. And your book, Maryn McKenna, was about MRSA, called Superbug, and about MRSA. And usually when we hear about MRSA, we think about hospital-borne infections, which is where I think a lot of people get MRSA in the hospital. So what's the relationship between that and the meat we may consume from farm animals? Yeah, it's a great question. So I do have to correct you on one thing. MRSA was originally just a hospital organism, but there are now more than 7 million cases a year that really have no direct tie to hospitals. It's very much a community epidemic. The reason why it's important to talk about MRSA in the context of farming is there's one specific strain of community MRSA that emerged in pigs in Holland in 2004 and now has moved all across the world. And we can tell that it has a direct tie to farming, not just because it was found in pigs and in pig farmers, but it has a very specific resistance signature that's related only to a drug that's given to pigs and is not given to humans for staph. So the tie between animals, antibiotic use in animals, and illness in humans in that particular case is absolutely undeniable.
Avinash, tell us more about this second ruling that was issued by the FDA a few weeks after the first one that Maryn says has some teeth. What did they do the second time around, and what does it mean?
Recently FDA announced that they're going to ban one class of antibiotics that are given to livestock. That these antibiotics are known as cephalosporins. As Maryn suggested, they account for just a tiny fraction of the much larger problem. They constitute about less than 0.25% of antibiotics given to animals domestically. We think this is just a token maneuver. It stands in stark contrast to what the agency did before Christmas by refusing to ban the widespread use of much more common antibiotics that constitute the vast majority of antibiotic use in healthy livestock. The timing is suspicious. It's a piecemeal solution. It doesn't actually address the much more systemic and wider problem and public health threat posed by antibiotic use in animal livestock.
Maryn, how do we know about the connection between antibiotic use in animals and MRSA or any other resistant diseases in human beings? How do you establish that science? Because the industry claims that your claims are overblown, and the science really is not rock solid.
Well, there have been countless studies that affirm the overuse of antibiotics on healthy livestock is leading to growing resistance to antibiotics in humans.
Yeah, Avinash is correct. And what's particularly important in those studies is that as the science has moved along over the decades in which we've had this proof, the science has gotten more sophisticated so that we now have direct molecular evidence that the strains are the same. It's not simply enough to say, oh, well, there's MRSA in these animals and there's MRSA in humans, but there's often MRSA in humans, so there can't be a connection. We actually can see that they're the exact same strains, and it's probably just moving one way.
And as you pointed out, Brian, nearly every major medical and science group, from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the American Medical Association, the American Pediatric Association, the World Health Organization, the American Public Health Association, even the FDA itself, agree that the rise of antibiotic resistance is a looming public health threat, and that unnecessary use of antibiotics in healthy animals plays a significant role in that growing antibiotic resistance. And personally, I choose to trust the medical professionals over the industry.
But Maryn, how do we know? Just because the same strains are found in humans and animals, why does that mean that we got it from animals, or that it has to do with feeding animals antibiotics?
Right. It's a really good question. But there have been some studies in this very vast body of literature that make it really clear that organisms with particular antibiotic signatures are coming from the farm. That dates back to the 1970s when a researcher at Tufts, Dr. Stuart Levy, who's sort of the godfather of all antibiotic resistance research in the United States, actually set up a kind of experimental farm with chickens and farm workers, gave particular drugs to the chickens, waited a couple of weeks, checked the chickens, and then checked the farm workers. They'd all been clean of that particular resistant strain before the experiment started, but there was that resistant strain in the chickens, and then later in the farm workers too. Subsequently, there's been plenty of research that shows that when you give antibiotics to animals on a farm, you can find that resistant bacteria in the manure lagoons, in groundwater, on the air downstream of the farms, on the clothes in dust on the clothes of the farm workers as they're going home. All of that evidence together, the preponderance of the evidence, just makes it unlikely that farms are not exerting that effect.
We just have 30 seconds left, but Avinash, is this like a once-in-a-generation gigantic defeat for environmental health advocates, or do you see the potential for progress still under President Obama?
Well, while we were disappointed with the announcement, it certainly didn't come as a surprise. As I said, this only confirms our resolve to move forward with a legal fight, and we're optimistic that we can make positive progress here. It's a fight to make sure that antibiotics continue to work when we need them most, putting the health of people first, and we want to ensure that one of medicine's most important life-saving advancements remains effective for people.
Thank you both very much for joining us. Now to the politics behind all this. Back in 2009, President Obama gave an address at the National Academy of Sciences. He pledged that science would not take a back seat to politics in his administration's policies.
We are restoring science to its rightful place. On March 9th, I signed an executive memorandum with a clear message. Under my administration, the days of science taking a back seat to ideology are over. Our progress as a nation and our values as a nation are rooted in free and open inquiry. To undermine scientific integrity is to undermine our democracy. It is contrary to our way of life. That's why I've charged John Holdren and the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy with leading a new effort to ensure that federal policies are based on the best and most unbiased scientific information. I want to be sure that facts are driving scientific decisions, not the other way around.
Well, despite that promise, two recent moves have some wondering if, at least in the shadow of the 2012 election, politics will take precedence over science in the Obama administration. We just heard about the FDA's announcement that it would not seek to restrict the use of antibiotics in farm animals, and there are other Obama issues too, including the decision not to allow the morning after birth control pill to be sold without a prescription to girls under 17. A science and ideology question is also in play among the Republican candidates for president, from former candidate Michelle Bachmann's claim that vaccines caused mental retardation to frontrunner Mitt Romney's questioning of the role of human activity in global warming. Joining us now to take a look at science in the 2012 race is Jonathan Moreno, author of The Body Politic, The Battle Over Science in America. He is a professor of medical ethics at the University of Pennsylvania and was a member of the Obama transition team. He joins us via Skype from Philadelphia. Professor Moreno, thank you so much for doing this. Hello from New York.
Hi, thank you, Brian.
First of all, to the issue we were just discussing, the antibiotics in farm animals, do you think this reversal, in effect, by the FDA was good public health policy, or was it politics trumping public health policy?
My understanding is that the reason they backed off is that these two antibiotics in question did not seem conclusively to pose a public health problem. What they're saying, and I've read a little bit of the commentary, is that there are a number of other antibiotics in question on the market now, and that the science really wasn't there that would have supported the original policy effort.
So you're not as cynical about this as our other two guests were?
No, I'm not. I don't think this is a good example of politics interfering with science.
How about the other thing that's been in the news that I mentioned, the decision not to approve the sale of the so-called morning after birth control pill to girls under 17 without a prescription? That again seemed inconsistent with the kinds of positions that President Obama would have taken in the past. The FDA, I believe, recommended it, and yet the White House overturned it. Politics trumping public health?
I'm afraid so. In this case, I would say it did. Very interesting, though, the way that the White House dealt with this, and I don't know that this has been commented upon elsewhere. They let the FDA commissioner, Dr. Margaret Hamburg, release a statement in which she said, this is what we recommended, this is what HHS is going to do, I think this is a mistake. And I frankly expected that, knowing Dr. Hamburg, how strongly she feels about these things, a person of tremendous integrity, that they were going to fire her and she was going to have to do the usual, well, I'm leaving now, thank you. Instead, I think they deliberately let her get out in front of it. And then Secretary Sebelius, and of course then the president, made comments on it. They tried to have it both ways. They tried to make it both, scientifically respectable, but also communicate indirectly that they were worried, that they were also taking into account where the public is on this kind of question. But I think this was an example of politics trumping science, because look, imagine the attack ad next year. It would have been the Willie Horton of 2012. The little girl who walks into the drugstore, gets the package off the shelf, comes up with the cash, and then an old guy standing out in front of the sidewalk looking down at her and saying, did you get it?
So at what point do those public values legitimately trump public health, if ever, in your opinion, if the vast majority of parents, I haven't seen polling on this, so I don't know if this is actually an accurate statement, but if the majority of parents in America do not believe that it should be legal for their 15-year-old daughters to get a day-after-sex birth control pill without a prescription, without consulting somebody, then should it be legal?
Well, look, we don't always make policy based on what most people think. And if we did that, we'd be operating in a very different kind of society. The FDA was given information from the company that answered two questions. Could girls as young as 11 understand the instructions for an over-the-counter intervention like this? And could they act on those instructions properly? Now, they had data for the former, namely, could they understand the instructions? they couldn't get enough data for 11 or 12-year-olds on the latter, namely, would they act on those instructions properly, because there are so few pregnant 11 and 12-year-old girls. So I think that this is a case where the data that were available were clear. And we don't always run our society, our government. We certainly shouldn't, based on what people would prefer. We should run it at least according to the evidence as best as we can get it. Now, the political system has every right to say, no, we don't want to do it that way. But at least we have to protect the science agency's integrity. And in this case, I'm afraid it was somewhat compromised.
Let's get to the Republicans in the presidential field. Was the low point of science and the Republican presidential primary campaign season so far, in your opinion, Michelle Bachmann saying that the HPV vaccine, which again goes to sexually
transmissible
explosive issue,
yeah.
In this case, sexually transmissible virus vaccine, to be administered to girls as young as 11 years old. She said that vaccine could cause mental retardation, and that there's been examples of that. I think there's been no examples of that. So is that the low point of science and the Republican presidential campaign so far?
There are some competing low points, Brian, but this was certainly not a high point. I think what Congressman Bachmann was trying to do there, as often is the case with these things, is have it both ways. She didn't want to directly associate herself with that view of what the vaccine could do. She was trying to express sympathy for a woman who claimed, that she had had this trouble in her life, and that she was trying to show human sympathy. Was not a good move on her part in this case. But look, we've already also had Governor Perry, who didn't seem to know what Texas taught in the schools with respect to creationism and evolution. We've had, I think, a certain amount of backing and forthing on climate change, even by Governor Huntsman and Governor Romney. So, there are enough low points to go around here. I'm not sure. That would probably be the one that was the most spectacular.
What is Governor Romney's position on global warming, as you understand it?
He seems to accept that there is climate change. He's given himself some space and some flexibility on the question of the human contribution. Although Governor Huntsman has been a little more explicit in saying that he believes the scientists, he's also given himself a little bit of wiggle room there. It's really Santorum, Perry, Bachmann not in the race anymore, Paul, and even Gingrich have become skeptics. So you might say that they've evolved on climate change.
What about Newt Gingrich's position? One of the ways that he's been in trouble with the Republican electorate is that 30-second spot that he made with Nancy Pelosi a few years ago, which was specifically the two of them coming together to say we disagree about a lot of things, but we agree that global warming needs to be taken seriously. Now he's running as far away from that as he can, though he says he always was opposed to cap and trade and the kinds of policies that Al Gore endorsed to fight global warming. So has Gingrich's position actually changed, or should we never have interpreted it too broadly just because he said to take the problem seriously with Nancy Pelosi?
Well, I think that Speaker Gingrich is a very smart guy, not as smart as he thinks he is, but a very smart guy. And I think he knows exactly what he's doing here. Now he's saying, well, I was just doing that with Speaker Pelosi to show that a Republican Democrat can have a dialogue. But, frankly, I think he knows what he's saying. He knows what the consensus is in the community. So, I take it with a big grain of salt.
Well, we are off to the races, talking about health, science, and the environment in the presidential race. Thank you very much, Jonathan Moreno.
Thank you, Brian.
We're number 2 in technology, according to Crain's New York Business. New York has supplanted Boston as the second most funded tech hub in the country. Mayor Bloomberg thinks that technology is the path to future prosperity and wants to create a center for technology innovation on Roosevelt Island. More recently, in his State of the State message, Governor Cuomo proposed high tech as key to saving New York's struggling upstate communities.
Buffalo, my friends, has the third highest poverty rate in the nation. In the nation, not in New York, in the nation, behind Detroit and Cleveland. 28% of the people in Buffalo are living in poverty. At a time when the state population was growing, Buffalo lost 10% of its population. This is another issue that has gone on for many, many years, while the state sat by and did not take dramatic action. It doesn't have to be that way. 25 years ago, the Capital District region, the region we're in today, Albany, had a struggling economy. The state began investing in Albany's high-tech industry. Today, Albany is home to a world-class center for nanotechnology. As the speaker mentioned, we just signed a new agreement with Intel and IBM, bringing thousands of additional jobs, and there's a vibrancy in the Capital District region around nanotechnology that would not have happened but for the state's investment. If we did it in Albany, we can do it in Buffalo. We believe in Buffalo. Let's put our money where our mouth is. We're ready to invest $1 billion in an economic development package for the city of Buffalo to bring business back to Buffalo. It's gone on for too long. It's going to stop today.
Well, if the governor and the mayor are to succeed in making New York more high-tech, we'll have to attract and keep top talent. Here to explain what it takes to do that are Dave Tisch, Managing Director of the startup accelerator TechStars NYC, and via Skype from Los Angeles, Jason Calacanis, an angel investor and tech entrepreneur formerly based in New York. Hi, guys. Thanks for coming on. Hi, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
So, David, what's so great about New York?
You know, I think what's great about New York, especially with tech, is what's great about New York for everything but tech, is that people come here to succeed. People come here to be the best at what they are. And I think when you translate that to technology, you see people coming at this space from different backgrounds. So whether it's people leaving law, people leaving finance, consulting, fashion, and applying their talent and their knowledge to technology. And I think you see some really disruptive businesses forming in New York that come from other areas.
Incubators and accelerators seem to be popping up like dandelions. Are they producing actual businesses?
Absolutely. I think if you look at the top tier accelerators, the top tier incubators, you see really quality companies coming from them. Just like in colleges, you have good and bad schools, you probably have good and bad accelerators as well.
Companies being produced by them that I might have heard of?
A company called Dropbox came out of an accelerator. Another one called Airbnb also came out of an accelerator. SendGrid, which came out of TechStars, is a company that powers the email that you get from companies like Facebook, Foursquare, Twitter. As they send you email, it goes through the SendGrid server. So you see real companies emerging out of these accelerators.
Jason, you're in LA. Does Silicon Valley extend all the way down there now?
No, not exactly, but we do have a lot of media and video with the YouTube sort of explosion. It has created another industry here, but a lot of commerce out of here as well. But New York is absolutely the second best city to start a company out of after the Valley. But great companies can come from any city. So Foursquare, Tumblr, and a lot of great companies are coming out of New York now. And of course, during the Silicon Valley 1.0 era, you had iVillage, About.com, and DoubleClick. So you had a large number of companies. New York is the capital of many things, but advertising, media, publishing, finance are included in that. And the internet is driven today in a large way by content and advertising.
Jason, do you think that New York, Silicon Alley, and Silicon Valley in California are even really competitive with each other? If New York has the pre-existing New York industries that you've both been talking about, finance and fashion and media, for example, so certain tech startups grow up around these, and maybe in California it's other kinds of things. Are the two more complementary or more competitive?
They're not really competitive. Just Silicon Valley is a lot bigger in terms of the scale of it, and Silicon Valley is a one-trick pony. It's all tech all the time. New York, you have a lot of diversity in terms of industries. As David said, fashion, Wall Street, publishing, commerce. It's a lot of different businesses there. So I think New York is great because a lot of young people want to live in that city, and it really draws hungry people. But the base of technology in Silicon Valley, the 40 years of growing companies there, means that it's very, very, very easy to start a company there. In New York, it's easy, but it's not very, very, very easy.
Right. But David, one of the concerns about this tech campus Cornell location on Roosevelt Island that the mayor is so excited about, one of the concerns is that it will educate the best and the brightest, like MIT does right now in the Boston area, like Stanford does out near Silicon Valley, and then the people will leave and they'll go to Silicon Valley because the jobs will be better and the lifestyle will be better. Are you concerned about that?
Not at all. I think the startup scene, the technology scene here has developed over the past probably 3 to 4 years in a way that there's, I don't think, a single technology company here who's not hiring, and that just doesn't extend to engineers. It extends to salespeople, business people, operations, anything of the sort. And you see a company like Gilt Group. Gilt Group is scaling up on a huge basis in jobs that have nothing to do with pure technology. So I think there's going to be jobs for every single graduate that comes out of the Roosevelt Island campus. So
you don't see it as a zero-sum game?
No, I think it's definitely a more long-term value than short-term value, but I think in terms of 5, 10 years from now, the impact that school will have, tremendous.
Do you have a view, Jason, about this campus that's starting up in New York and whether it can compete with Stanford or MIT or whether it needs to, or whether we even need big, huge technology campuses for tech sector job growth?
We definitely do need that. All cities need that. All cities are trying to get more developers and technical people into the workforce. There's an unlimited number of jobs for people who can program and can code. Unfortunately, even before college, our K through 12 system is not very good at producing engineers, and it's something Americans just don't have an interest in doing. And we've really got to start at a much younger age, instilling math, science, and engineering into students. It's not just going to be solved by colleges. It's got to go all the way down to the 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. But if we do focus on that, it will turn the entire economy of our country around. That's why I'm very hopeful for our economy, because there's an unlimited opportunity for people with tech backgrounds to get employment, and not just employment, but really well-paying jobs. There's no drought of jobs for high-tech people. It's just a drought of high-tech people. It's people
right.
who know how to code.
That's really interesting. Do you find that here in New York too?
100%. I think that the more engineers, the better. And I think you'll see bigger companies start forming when there are more engineers, because the companies can scale. I think the biggest thing, Jason brought up Foursquare, brought up Tumblr. Those two companies have probably 30, 40 engineering roles open at all times.
New York companies.
Absolutely. And they'd love to scale. They just can't find the talent, whether it's here or in the Valley.
So is the problem, go ahead, Jason.
I was saying we're probably in the 3rd or 4th inning of the internet. I know that sounds crazy to say since we're essentially 15 years into this, but it's really only the 3rd or 4th inning. There are 6 or 7 innings of innovation to occur. If we had 100 times the number of engineers, there's still so many more opportunities on a global basis to take advantage of. And the opportunity is quite literally unlimited because of the fact that internet companies now make more money outside the United States than they do inside the United States. The opportunity is truly global. And people talked about globalization, in the 90s, but it's actually happening now. Companies like Google or Foursquare, they might have more users outside and more revenue outside the United States than inside the United States.
And I agree, 3rd or 4th inning, I mean, maybe not even that. 15 years is nothing. When we were 15 years into electricity or 15 years into agriculture, it was still kind of the top of the 1st. David, on a policy level, what's the next thing you think that government should do? Getting involved to get this tech campus here is probably a really good thing. It sounds like something needs to be done with K through 12 science and math education. Is it that, or is it that and other things?
No, I think Jason's right. I think getting the K through 12, I guess K through 12 student base to understand that this is an option, to understand that this is a career, to really define what it means to work at a startup tech company. I think that's really important, is that people see, guys in jeans and a t-shirt going to work, and there's is that really work? Yes, it is, and it's probably more revolutionary work than almost any other sector. And getting that instilled in parents to let their kids learn what it means to work at a startup, to learn what it means to start a company, incredibly powerful. I think that, the numbers, I don't know them, but job creation starts at startup companies. It's the smallest companies that grow the job sector the most. And so I think encouraging the K through 12 group to understand what it means to go into these industries, incredibly important.
So Jason, I introduced you before as somebody formerly from New York who now lives in LA, extremely successful as a tech company entrepreneur. Why'd you leave?
Well, I lost the lease on my big loft on 26th Street, and I was bi-coastal, and you come out to LA and you're just sort of, it lulls you. But I'm dreaming of coming back to New York. I just need one big win, and then I'm going to try to buy the Knicks from Dolan. That's my dream. But on a serious note, you asked before about these accelerators and these incubators. It's my worldview that those are going to have a bigger impact, excuse me, a much bigger impact than anything a college could ever do. These programs are creating companies that actually are sustainable and growing. And even if they don't, if you compare them to higher education, which is an absolute complete ripoff, where you pay $100,000 or $200,000 and you come out with virtually no skills that are going to prepare you to start a company. These accelerators, like TechStars, which is a phenomenal one, and that's in Boston, Seattle, and New York, and Boulder, that program alone, I mean, they pay you money to then go learn how to be an entrepreneur. We should have 1,000 TechStars around the world, 1,000 Y Combinator around the world. These things are better than going to college, much better. I mean, if my daughter goes to college instead of starting a company, I'll be absolutely crushed.
If this was supposed to be a debate, it has definitely turned into a love fest, and that's okay with me. But David,
Jason's just jealous of not being in New York right now.
But what about
I am actually jealous. I wish I was back.
He was giving props to TechStars, TechStars NYC. Tell us what you do actually at TechStars.
So TechStars is like a boot camp for startup companies. We take applications like a college. We had 1,200 companies apply for our last program. We selected 12 of them. We give the 12 companies that get into our program about $120,000. 3.5 months of office space, but it really is focused around mentorship. And so what we're doing is bringing people in who've been there, done that before, to sit down with our companies, to work one-on-one with the companies for that 3.5 month period to help them do better, accelerate, if you will.
Good luck in New York.
Thank you.
Jason, good luck in LA. And if you buy the Knicks, invite me to a game, okay?
I will, absolutely, courtside.
And that's it for this week's show. We roll out a new episode Wednesday nights at 7:30. Or see us anytime at CUNY.tv. And check out my daily radio show weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC. Tomorrow morning, does air travel need to be so annoying? That's on 93.9 FM and AM 820 WNYC. Talk to you then.